from winning 7 World Championship titles to facing the first winless season of his entire F1 career. Lewis Hamilton has to answer the burning question sooner than later. Is this the end of the road for the 7-time world champion? Everything was great until 2020 when Hamilton had just won his 7th title in Turkey. But ever since then, F1 fans have watched him lose to Max Verstappen twice in a row. And if I'm being honest, he isn't off to a great start this season either. I mean, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff said that the Bahrain Grand Prix was literally the worst day of racing, especially considering that his star driver finished in P5. Things aren't looking so good. To top it off, he's also going to be out of contract by the end of this season. And while Mercedes should have whipped out a brand new contract by now, it seems like the negotiations won't come to an end. Not to mention that after 11 years of partnership with Mercedes that earned him 6 world titles, no one expected it to end like this. I mean, Hamilton was winning every race and dominating the F1 grid. But ever since Verstappen's become the biggest threat out there, he's been dropping down to 3rd, to 4th, to 5th, and so on. And that's not something you'd expect from the 7-time champion.
For me, I'd rather just hand the keys to my friends or something like that. I don't like traffic. It's more stressful for me.
But before digging into his performance, I think Mercedes should probably confirm whether he's going to be on the team next season or not, because there are rumors going around about his retirement. For starters, Wolff is pretty convinced that Hamilton isn't going to retire anytime soon. But if that's the case, the team has to improve one way or the other. And if it doesn't, then Hamilton might face another winless season, and that's going to ruin a lot of things for the team. And just last year, in 2022, when Daniel Ricciardo was dealing with the McLaren axe, Mercedes swooped in with a reserve driver role for the 2023 season. And rumor has it, the offer implied that once Hamilton's contract was up, by the end of the season, Ricciardo could step in to replace him in 2024. And that would earn the Australian a competitive race seat for his potential comeback. But as soon as the news made headlines, the 7-time champion made it pretty clear that he's not going anywhere anytime soon. If anything, he's got his eyes set on a record-breaking 8th championship title. On top of that, Wolff also confirmed that the duo was working on a multi-year contract over the winter break.
And that's why we want to be role models to encourage particularly men to go out and say, I need help.
And by now, you'd think we would have heard about the official contract. But clearly, that's not the case. Instead, we're all watching Hamilton's future hang by a thread. Honestly, right after the first race, one thing's for sure. Mercedes has already thrown in the towel right after the first race of the season. In fact, Wolff and George Russell claim that Red Bull's going to win all the races this season. Sure, Verstappen's pretty talented and with an insane amount of good luck, but even that seems like a stretch. On top of that, let's not forget that he's dealing with his own F1 curse right now. Yep, I'm talking about the curse that's been around since 2017. Basically, there's a trend that whoever wins the opening race never manages to win the championship title of the same season. And guess who won the Bahrain Grand Prix this season? Max Verstappen, of course. So yeah, it might be superstitious and all, but a lot of people can't wait to see how this rolls out. As for Mercedes, if the team's trying to hop onto a new concept in the middle of the season, it's gonna be a death sentence.
My driving license, I was 17, and I couldn't wait to get out of the house. And I was just always driving up and down the country, running out of fuel.
Because a new concept is going to take time to optimize, and that's going to force the team to compromise a bunch of race weekends just to get a hang of it. And right before that, they need to figure out the contract situation with Hamilton. But his declining performance over the past season isn't going to help that. Let's face it, Mercedes has a whole load of struggles coming up this season. For starters, they've got some issues in their car that they might need to figure out. Not only do they need to get their drivers back on track with exceptional cars, but they also need to take over top teams. Red Bull, Ferrari, and even Aston Martin. They're all in the lead right now. And let's say a multi-year contract comes into play and Hamilton signs another official deal with Mercedes. Do you think that's a fair deal at this point, considering how the 7-time champion continues to struggle in multiple races? Is he really prepared to commit himself to a team that's not as competitive anymore? But also, he needs to figure out his options, because the only two other things he's looking at are retirement or a transition to another top team. But I don't see any big empty seats waiting to welcome the 7-time champion there either. Meanwhile, he's hungry for the record-breaking 8th title, and he's not going to let it go so easily. And he spent the 2022 season gritting his teeth and plotting his comeback revenge in 2023.
But we have to continue to hold on. And I would imagine for so many people out there, that is probably the most difficult thing.
Now, since the car isn't back in contention, he's got a bigger problem to deal with. Because even if he decides to stick around, he's not too sure if the car is going to be any better next season. And so, Sky Sports set up a lie detector test with him to make it even more controversial. And Hamilton had quite a lot to say. For starters, he's definitely going to stick around until he wins his 8th championship wins. There's no way he's quitting Formula One before that. As for his contract, he's surprisingly not in a rush either. But again, this interview was right before the opening race in Bahrain, so I wouldn't be too sure about his patience anymore. Mercedes is clearly struggling. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It's the team that dominated Formula One for years, breaking one record after the other. And now suddenly, the same team had its car all wrong. It's simply not as competitive as it should be.
To Dubai from that quite long flight, just seeing everyone in the team top celebrating all together was quite an emotional.
And if I'm being honest, their current level of performance isn't the biggest surprise for F1 fans out there. Around the same time last year, the team had similar questions about the 2022 season since their porpoising was a massive headache to deal with. And thanks to that, they couldn't really keep up with Red Bull or Ferrari. After all, there was one defining factor that changed everything for the team. The change in F1's technical regulations in 2022 wasn't easy to manage. Basically, it determined the designs of the cars, and that was a game changer for Mercedes that ended its streak of chasing titles from 2014 all the way until 2021. Every team on the grid had their own way of dealing with the regulations. Some pushed out new design concepts, while others found new ways to give themselves a competitive edge. But throughout the process, Mercedes continued to struggle. And as the season went on, it didn't take long to figure out that most teams fell into either one of the two categories, a Red Bull-style car or a Ferrari-style car. But Mercedes went down its own road that didn't lead to a win. It developed the W13 car through 2022 that went on to score a 1-2 finish in Brazil. At this point, even Verstappen started taking up Mercedes as serious competition. But sadly, that didn't last too long. Having said that, Hamilton really needs to figure out his contract situation if he wants to stay in Formula One long enough for that record-breaking title. Until then, that was everything you needed to know about Hamilton's shaky future with Mercedes in F1.